Hello. In this video, we're going to show how to fire up the SanteDB and the SanteMPI HL7 receivers inside of a Docker container. I wouldn't recommend doing this for production. Typically with production systems, you want to put a little more security around your HL7 receivers. But this is just for demonstration purposes to get you up and running. So the first thing that you have to note is the SanteMPI Docker compose scripts by default don't enable any authentication. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually enable authenticating on a non-secure channel. So I'm just going to start up Visual Studio Code here, and I'm going to go SDB HL7 Authentication equals MSH8. And I'm just going to make sure that I've spelled that correctly. Yep, I have. So we're going to just save this file. And then I'm going to switch back over to my console window. And I'm just going to do Docker compose up. And I'm going to let Docker spin up here. Now, this container takes a little while to fire up on my laptop that I'm using to record this today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually switch over to my HL7 sender here. And I'm going to actually configure the sender in HL7 Inspector. You can use any tool. You can write a program in C# to send HL7 messages over sockets. I'm using HL7 Inspector because it's a little bit easier. And what I want to do is I want to verify that my connection information is correct. So I'm using localhost 2100. And the encoding, recommend using UTF-8. But for today's demonstration, it's not going to make a very big difference. The other thing I have up and running is the installation qualification tool for Fire. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the installation qualification tool to create some of the security principles and identity domains for us so that when we go to our HL7 messages, we can actually send the HL7 messages to and from the server. Now, I'm not going to show how to actually create additional identity domains and configure them. Some of the HL7 messages that you see out in the wild, they don't use CX4, which means that the MPI has to be configured to know which identity authority, the particular sender has in order to map that to an identity domain. But we're not going to be doing that. We're just going to be sending a query. So I will just exclude that for now. So we've got our service instance started. We can see because it's the startup is completed. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to run the qualification tool here just to validate that everything's spun up. And also what this is going to do, this series of unit tests does create some patience that we can then query in HL7 version 2. And take a look at some of the differences between HL7 version 2 messaging and HL7 Fire messaging. So these are going to be running. In the meantime, what I need to do is create an authentication principle for my HL7 sender. The SOAP UI tests do this automatically because it can communicate with the REST-based services to create security principles automatically, or security identities automatically. But unfortunately with HL7 version 2, we can't do that. So what I'm going to do is I've downloaded the latest version of the SDBAC tool. So I'm going to launch that, and I'm going to log in as an administrator here. And what I want to do is let's actually open up a sample message so we can see what our authentication pattern needs to look like. So I'm just going to open up a message here. And like I said, we're doing a query because we don't want to have to create identity domains and do all that configuration quite yet. So if you want to use the sample messages in the unit tests for SanteMPI, OHIE CR0830 is a good sample message to use. And we can tell it's a query because it starts with QBP Q22. And what I want to do is I want to expand the MSH header. And I'll see here that MSH3 is a value called test harness, and MSH4 is a value called test. So if I come back over to my SDBAC command prompt and I type in application.list, what I want to see in here is an entry that says test harness. And that was created by the SOAP UI tool. And if I go application.info, test harness, the next thing I want to make sure is that it actually has access to perform unrestricted operations on clinical data. And there are other information pieces that are shown on the application.info, but that's not important for our use case. Now, what we want to do is the sending facility, which is MSH4, is just test. And the way that SanteDB's authentication works for HL7 messages is you have to create a device identity, which is a combination of test harness, the application, running at facility test. Because in production, there would be different facilities that would be potentially running this test harness program. And we want SanteDB to be able to differentiate between them. And we want, from a security perspective, to allow for different authorities and identities coming from those different sites. So what I have to do is I have to create a device. So I'm going to go device.add. And the way that you create an HL7 version 2 device is you say test harness and then pipe test, because that's the actual combination credential that's going to be used from the system. I'm going to create a secret for it, and I'm just going to call this foobar, all caps. And you'll see now that there's a test harness test, and if I do device.info, test harness test, you'll see that I'll get some security information about this new credential. Finally, to actually send this message, what I have to do is I have to update the MSH8. Now, I'm going to switch over to editing mode here. So let's switch over to editor view. Now, if we were using node authentication, the way that node authentication works is the actual X509 certificate, the client certificate, authenticates the sender. We don't have that. So what we have to do is we have to supply both the device secret and the application secret as one string in MSH8. And the way you do that is you do foobar, which is my device secret, and then the separator is a plus sign. And because I'm using the SOAP UI credential, its secret is just test harness. And I'm going to actually just send this message now. And what you'll see here, if I just select this, is we're going to get back an AA, which means that the message was accepted. Let's run the query. But you see here that it's got NF, which means it didn't find any records that match. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to update my query criteria. So instead of being PID31 and PID341, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this, let's just do PID5.1 void. And 5.1, PID5.1 is the patient's family name. And we should get a patient called Ollie Oid in here. And you'll see this time we have now a message which has a result, a PID segment. And we have here Ollie Oid is that particular patient. And there you go. You've actually done a basic HL7 integration with SanteDB and also by extension Sante MPI. Thank you for watching.